As Donald mentioned, I'm going to be talking a little bit about big data and the Internet of Things, and really talking about the new business models that we need to come up with for the future. The one thing, though, that I think we need to get clear is the definition of big data. I mean, there is as many definitions out there as there is actually big data. Personally, I prefer the Gartner definition, which is looking at the 3 V's: volume, variety, and velocity. There'll be a test on this later, so please pay attention. I actually add the 4th one, which I think is veracity. We're getting so much out there that's actually fake, so there's no point in setting things up, making things work for stuff that isn't actually real. So today I'm just going to be talking very briefly about what the Internet of Things, where the business opportunities are, making sense of the data, why are we doing this? Encourage the adoption and the innovation of IoT throughout everywhere, really. And what we're looking at is how it can be used. Why are we looking at it? And then briefly, the latest trends and developments. But I'm actually really going to be focusing on the new business models that are coming up, because I think as carriers, communication professionals, we need to be ready for that. And it's a very different world to what we're currently doing. How big is the IoT market? Look, the figures are all out there. I mean, the latest one, and I think this was thank you to Liquid Telecom, because they recently published a study, so it gave me the latest figures, is in Africa we're looking at $840 million so far. Globally, though, you've got 8.4 billion connected devices, and they're anticipating that that will increase to 20.5 billion by the year 2020. 2020 always sounded very futuristic. It's 3 years off. I actually think this is way underestimated, because the more people use things, the more they recognize how they can use them, and they find different uses, different needs and applications. Gartner predicts mainstream adoption in Africa by 2020. I differ with this, because I actually think we've already got mainstream adoption. We've definitely got it within the urban areas, and in the rural areas they've been using it quite extensively, for instance in commercial farming. Most tractors, etc., coming out now, when they actually go over the soil, test the soil, see what the water is like, where the fertilizer is needed, because it's a commercial imperative that you only put fertilizer, because that's one of the most expensive things that you've got to put in the ground, apparently. It's really looking at best effective use. So commercial farming through Africa is already using this, and has been using it for the last 5 or 6 years. So I think more as we get the mainstream and the business models behind it to use that data, it'll start creeping out the woodwork where we're already using it in our daily lives. Social needs is really driving the current adoption within Africa. A lot of the examples that I found were related to social needs. Now, whether that's because the donors are paying for it, so it's rolling out quicker, or whether it's just because business is lagging, or I'm not quite sure what the reasons are. But I think the next few years are going to be really interesting. Connectivity is obviously providing the biggest challenge there, because you're talking about social needs in the deep rural areas where there isn't connectivity. So again, another business opportunity, getting cheap data across a country, and that's not just South Africa, I think that's throughout. When we look at what the use cases are in Africa already, Rwanda is pretty much leading the pack. They've set up something called Smart Africa. It's a coalition of 11 countries, and they're looking at how they can use big data, Internet of Things, to actually improve people's lives. The safety, the IP cameras we're seeing throughout the South African cities, consequent reduction in crime, increase in tourism, and so on. That's basically using the IoT. Are we using the data, though, that these are creating more effectively? We started a community project within Sunny Hill once we'd created the fiber. And what we did is we actually introduced number plate recognition, so that when a car is hijacked anywhere in Joburg, gets on this hit list, if it enters an area where we have our fiber running and we have the IP cameras, it will actually pick up that number plate and hopefully close the hijackers down. Smart meters, electricity consumption. I see they're talking in Cape Town now, given the level 5 restrictions, that they're talking about the smart meters on the water side to control usage Now, to me, a lot of these use cases are all about control, rather than the perfect marriage of the Internet of Things and big data. So why are people using too much electricity? What can we do more effectively? How can we make sure they reduce water? That is still very much lacking. These sensors are out there telling us what? They're not giving us the wise whens and so forth. So you can actually take action on the information that's produced. The drones. I think this is the most exciting. I do know my husband wants a drone for Christmas. He's not getting one, but dream on. When you see now with the rhinos and so on, the tracking, unfortunately the poachers are also using drones. They're looking for where the rhinos are, knowing where to poach and how to do it. So it's just a matter of, let's make sure we get there first. IBM's already established research labs in 2 African countries to identify opportunities. The first day we spoke briefly about the Watson and the artificial intelligence. To me it's a glorified search engine, but that's where it is at the moment. They're looking at use cases, smart cities, smart retail. So when we go shopping, how can we use it better? And I know Microsoft has already announced that they're opening the cloud in South Africa. IBM is not going to be far behind. They've already looked for premises. The customers are really driving this. The urban areas, we're pretty much there with the rest of the world. I mean, everybody uses the Internet of Things every day. I'm sure you use Google Maps for those of you that came outside of Durban, and Uber. All of these are new businesses that are built on the Internet of Things, giving us new use cases and new ways of doing things, breaking the old business models. The next frontier, obviously, is on the social needs. It's a cheap and effective way to actually drive actions where they're actually needed. So how's it different from machine to machine that we've been used to all along? Are we really just talking about a bunch of sensors out there, the information that sensors collecting going into a great big database? I think a lot of people think about the Internet of Things and big data as that. It's so much more. And it's growing up. So when I talk about the change in business model, machine to machine, you were looking really at the communication services. Where could you make money? Was making sure the machine could talk to another machine. Going forward, and it's already happening, as you see, this is an old slide, I do apologize, I couldn't get the most recent figures. We're now looking at the professional services. What's going on around the how, what, and why? The SLA management, monitoring and effective management of what's going on out there, and then your decision support, your reports and analytics. So connectivity, while it's still a huge part of the value pyramid, is declining in importance when you look at the entire business ecosystem here. And this, I'm sorry, it's an incredibly busy slide, but it was one way of, within each one of these is an opportunity. You have your sensors out there. Now, we have existing sensors that are not being used effectively. Which ways can we use them more effectively? On the connectivity side, getting the data. Remember, it's volume, variety, velocity, and veracity. Connectivity has a critical role to play in that. And then obviously then the people and processes that you have to put around it to build your proper ecosystem. We talk a lot about the last 100 meters, the last 9 yards. We pretty much conquered it. But when you look at the Internet of Things, it's very much that last piece that's the most important. We talked about the Internet of Apps. Now, all of that is through the Wi-Fi. We're still not seeing the home developments. You know, your smart fridge, something telling you what you can cook for dinner that night, what your shopping list is, etc. The only reason we're not seeing that is because we don't have the adequate Wi-Fi and connectivity in the homes. So as soon as that's been properly conquered, I think we'll see a huge explosion. So what's the future? As I mentioned, I do think the business opportunities are there. This is purely a snapshot of what you can do within a factory, looking at the capabilities, looking at the benefits. Having the sensors there, you will see the minute a machine goes down. You don't need that human intervention, so that you can actually monitor ahead of that machine breaking, because it's slowed down in terms of what it's producing. hang on, focus, send something in. So it's really looking at complete ecosystems around everything that we do. The challenges, it's fragmented industry. It's very much a bit here, a bit there. The security and privacy of data. And I think that this is one of Africa's largest challenges, because we tend to think, and there are regulations throughout Africa that says the data belongs to that country. It doesn't. You can't tell where someone's signing in from. You should be able to have a data center in China or the cheapest place monitoring what's going on. We shouldn't have to put it in our own countries, but it's a change in mindset to say, okay, information's out there, it's freely available for everybody to use. If we join the party, we can also use it. Obviously, managing the vast amounts of data. When we're talking, it's not just the sensors, it's what everybody puts on Facebook, WhatsApp. Look, I'm not the millennial generation, although I see Angus isn't here. I am an audience of one. I'm also a customer of one. But on Facebook, I was searching the other day, thinking, you know, where you could buy a private island quite cheaply, and I came up with Mexico. So I looked at the prices to fly to Mexico. Now, this was on my Google browser on my phone. For the next 2 weeks, Facebook was posting me adverts on cheap flights to Chihuahua and hotel accommodation. Personally, I found that scary. I really felt Big Brother's arrived, and how on earth did he know what I was doing on one app? Facebook's getting it right. They are looking at the entire thing of what you're doing on your phone. Android, every app you download, you have to give them permission to access all of your data in all of your apps. Otherwise, they won't load the app on their, store. Now, I realize I'm talking to a lot of techies, and maybe someone can show me how I can actually hack that out. But they are collecting all this data, and the purpose is to create a customer of one. The millennials are expecting, when they walk into a company, or a bank is the easiest. When they walk into a bank, they expect that bank to know about them, because they live their life in the public realm. They do not want to fill in forms. They expect you to use, you as a company, to use the information they put out there and design a product that's specific for them. They're living their lives in the public eye, and they're saying to us, use it, guys, or I'm not coming to you, I'll go to somebody else because it's easier, I give you the information, give me what I need, which is a product specific to my needs. So we now need to find the right business model in terms of how can we serve this new world. And I realize we're talking about carriers here, so I will focus on that. This particular one was drawn up for telco, so I do apologize, but I think you can really look and say carriers as well. Your legacy business is still very much on the connectivity side. Old habits die hard. If you're big and you're successful, even with a low ARPU, it doesn't matter. You're going to carry on doing what you've always done. SIM card based. So it's not as, well, it's mobile, but it's not as mobile or as flexible as it needs to be. It's less complex, and it's machine to machine, high volume. In addition, there is a lack of domain expertise. We're talking about a new world here, and we're serving that new world with old businesses. Businesses that have been successful at doing what they're doing, but won't be successful in the future. You cannot continue to repeat what you've done and hope things are going to turn out differently. They will. And how they will turn out is, as a carrier or a telco, your business will decline because some new player is going to come along that gets this right. We're not really talking about only connectivity. We're now talking about managed services, solutions to what everybody wants. Now, I know a lot of companies say, I sell solutions, I don't sell hardware or software. Personally, bollocks. We're all selling hardware or software and putting it together. But the ones that do get it right to sell solutions will make a lot of money. And if necessary, we need a go-to-market partner. We need some of these young whiz-kids that come up with a new way of working. We need someone that takes that data, analyzes it, someone else that stores it. We actually need to put together a partnership. In the old days, it was a slow business cycle. You had plenty of time to catch up, change your systems, change the way you operate, change what you're actually doing and why you're doing it. And yeah, I mean, I'm probably one of these. There's a lot of skepticism out there. Are we really talking about a new world? When you talk to a lot of kids that grew up with this, I mean, babies that are going onto an iPad, pressing it, and it's a magazine that doesn't work. Well, sorry, a magazine is an iPad that doesn't work. Sorry, you got that the wrong way around. You know, they use an iPad from before they talk, before they crawl. This is the customer that we're going to be dealing with. This is a customer that's already growing up and entering the workforce, and growing up and becoming a customer. We cannot continue to serve them with the old ways of working. Yeah, why should I do this? I've got a stable business. I'm making a lot of money. You're not going to continue to make a lot of money unless we change. We need to start thinking more like entrepreneurs, even within the big organizations. A lot of big organizations have innovation departments. I personally think that's appalling. You need a department to innovate. Why aren't everybody working for you innovating? We need to think more like entrepreneurs, on our feet, quick reaction to market changes. So what does an Internet of Things married to big data service provider actually look like? This is a very simplistic model. You have the device provider, network provider, platform, application, and then the ultimate customer. Highly simplified. This is actually the logical architecture. Hadoop has grown up. A lot of what's now needed around Hadoop with big data is available on open source software. All of this is taking that open source and putting it together in a business model. So you can do an end-to-end process open source. It's a hell of a busy slide, sorry, but I'm sure you can see it clearly when it's more printed out. So is this the next gold rush? When WhatsApp was purchased and a fortune was paid, we all said, oh, you've got rocks in your head. Do they? Or is information going to be the next key defining indicator? Integrating the data from multiple sources, going back to Gartner, the variety is key. Because you could do some things in one app, it doesn't give necessarily your full picture. I mean, me searching for flights to Mexico. What they should have picked up is I'm seriously thinking about retiring and I want to purchase property. So who's selling me that? Who's coming to me now? Because they've picked up the wrong piece because they only looked at one area of my life. So actually putting all this data together and making sense so you can then deliver what they need is where it is the next gold rush. So I think the value is not going to be in the collection of data, although there is space in the business ecosystem for someone to do that and sell the data. Given privacy concerns, that's probably going to be a rocky area, and there's going to be different laws in different countries. As much as they talk about trying to globally get a level platform, it's not there, and I don't think it will be there. So where is the value? Is actually taking all of this data and turning it into insights. It's looking at what a person does in every aspect of their lives, so you can then make sense of what they're going to be needing, preempt, get down to that customer of one. And that's where the value is going to be. We always talked about turning data into information. We're now actually taking data further from information into knowledge, and from there into wisdom, anticipating what next and why. The challenges. A lot of the data that is available is not available in the public domain. In theory, governments should be publishing all the data that they hold on individuals. They tend to selectively publish the data, and anyway, governments are too slow. So by the time they publish what data they have, it's out of date, life has moved on. So we're living our lives in the public space, But what we do and how we do it does belong to certain companies. However, what is changing is the sharing, the free, the whole new world. Because we're living our lives in the public space, we expect that information to be freely available, because we're making it available to make our lives more comfortable. You get back to the millennium. I expect you to know all about me as I walk through your door. You've lost me if I have to fill in a form. You can even take this as simplistically, and I don't know why somebody hasn't actually done this in South Africa. You have Eureka. You have Eureka with your telco, proof of address, etc. You have Eureka with your bank. Why hasn't someone set up one? Eureka once, use multiple. There must be a business model in that. Even if you're only charging a couple of rand each time, everybody has to do it. That's a couple of rand on an annuity basis. They then want you to do it annually. Again, update, out it goes. It's a new business. It's there and it's available, and it's information that you could pick up quite freely externally. You don't even have to pay for collection on that, because as a customer, I'll give it to you because I want it to be done. So where to next? I've talked a lot about the new business model, how we can use data more effectively. Big data is going to become more fast and approachable. Event-based marketing. If I put on Facebook, I've got engaged, why hasn't, well, I mean, not at my age, but if I was a 20-odd-year-old, why hasn't the bank contacted me to say, oh, right, I can see you've got engaged. Are you interested in buying your first home? Here's what you qualify as a home loan. Can I help you with that? I realize cash is going to be tough when you're actually going into the wedding cycle. Here, I can offer you this personal loan. Now, how much more effective will a bank be if it contacts me at a point in time when I need them, ahead of me going to them? I love this terminology within big data, the data lakes, the damming. I mean, sorry, I know I'm talking to a technical audience, but I really like when they talk about the data lakes. In other words, the unstructured data that's just put in this huge lake for everybody to use. So we need to be leveraging these data lakes. They exist, they're already out there. Most places have them set up, but we're not actually extracting from them because they don't know how to do it. They don't know why they're doing it. And I think, again, it gets back to event-based marketing. You can take it down to even as somebody is walking through a supermarket or a white goods store. If I stop outside the fridge and I look at several fridges, somebody somewhere's got to pick up, I'm interested in buying a fridge. How much more effective would it be if I instantly got a zap and an SMS saying 5% off fridges today? You've converted me from a browser to someone that's highly likely to buy, because I'm getting that 5% offer as I stand outside that shiny new fridge. Architecture's mature. It's no longer going to be one size fits all. It really is going to be the first movers changing their business model, getting it right, and having a completely different architecture to take advantage of the free data that's out there. We spoke about variety, not volume or velocity. Volume or velocity already exists. Variety is going to drive the investments in the future, a la the purchase of WhatsApp. Still a lot of things out there available to purchase. Instagram. I mean, I know Mark uses Instagram a lot. He should be bombarded with offers on free wine or, this restaurant having a special offer. But nobody's marrying that with his habits. And obviously the veracity side. And I don't know what the solution is on the veracity, because people put out there what they want the world to see. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to light up big data. It's not there yet. We mentioned Watson is really a glorified search engine. It's a logical architecture interrogating words and probability to come up with the best answer. It's clever, smart, and it comes up with the most amazing things, but it's still really Google on steroids. We will see the next wave of artificial intelligence. We'll see that actual intelligence coming in. If that, then that. But hang on, what about that? And obviously the convergence. Self-service analytics. If someone sets up the right way to interrogate all this data that's freely available, you can sell it per use, given the use of cloud and so on, the new business models on software. You can then have customers globally, worldwide. There's still a huge gap. There are analytics companies available, but they're not available for the SME or the small startup. They are going to need the customer of one as well. So pay per use, get the data. So thank you. This is a little bit of humor to finish it off. Any questions from anybody, or are you all still fast asleep from the cocktail party? Oh dear. Don't ask me anything technical, please.
I'm not sure why I always get that reaction. Hello, my name is Nishal, public internet servant. On behalf of the INTP people in the room, I'd like to say no thanks to analyzing that big data lake. My worry is this. My worry is that while all what you're saying sounds really good, we still don't have basic privacy things in place yet. So POPI is not a reality. So for those of you that are not South African, POPI is the Prevention of Personal Information something or the other.
Protection of personal information.
You probably know it better than I do. What's the scope for doing all of this when basic things like that should be in place? Because if I stop in front of a fridge, chances are I'm not looking at wanting to buy a fridge. I'm probably thinking, why did they design this like this? I don't need to own a fridge because I hardly live at home. And I don't want to be bombarded with SMSs to say, go and buy a fridge, there's 10% off or something like that. So I'm really concerned that the reality you're talking about is a potential reality without me explicitly giving access to people to get my information. So where's the marriage for things like POPI to be implemented before the lake starts to be drained? It wasn't too tough.
No, that wasn't. You were very gentle on me, Nishal, thank you. Again, and I think this comes down to a generational thing. I don't want to live my life in the public space, and I don't. I do expect to have to give permission to somebody before they bombard me with adverts. But I'm not the customer of the future. And nor looking around this room are probably 85% of us here. I'm not being rude about your age. It's genuinely the way we behave and the way we purchase. And Nishal, I was really saying, hang on a sec, are you wandering around looking at fridges when you're not looking to buy? You need a life, hun. You really do. But I get your point. I do get your point.
Michuki Mwangi, internet community. So my question is related to one of the slides. I think you talked about the location of the data. That becomes contentious when you start talking to governments and the issue of sovereignty and where is the data, where is it being stored, and all the issues around that. Now, I would like to hear more with respect to your views in regards to government's perception or views with respect to location of data. We've seen that in the EU. What do you think should be the views or positions of governments in this part of the world?
Thank you. Good question. This is one area in my life where I actually, and I'm not particularly on the left-wing side or anything, but I'm a total anarchist when it comes to the government and internet. As far as I'm concerned, if we waited for governments to get off their butts, we'd still be waiting for the internet to start. How dare governments say that I, as an individual, they own my data because of the country I live in? It's not always the country I operate in. It's not the country that defines me and what I'm doing. And I expect my data to be freely available to everybody. And how governments can say they own my data. Sorry, they don't. I own my data. I should have the ability to make that choice. So why are governments saying that they have sovereignty and they actually own the data in the country it's produced? I don't know, because they're not using it. They're not making my life any better using that data to know that I need more electricity in winter. Duh. As far as I'm concerned, my data belongs to me as an individual, and it's freely available to the world. So yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I am an anarchist. I don't think governments have any role to play in communications except by making regulations more effective, easier, and not the stumbling block they are. I do think they should protect citizens from themselves, as with the protection of personal information. Great. Make sure that we opt in. But I'm not an idiot. I don't need to be told how to live my life. So in that respect, total anarchist. Sorry. So I can't answer your question because I don't think they've got anything to do with it. Oh dear, no, that poked the sleeping bear. He's limping, so, you know, he's slowed down a bit.
So there's another side to that argument. It's Nishal again.
Really?
For the people that are listening to the stream, the other side to that argument is that while you might believe your data is free and open, there are others that may not be as informed as you are, right? And aside from seeing the government as the bad thing, and I'm not in any way a government supporter of most things, but I still think that the government has a right to protect individuals, and I think that's what Michuki's question was coming from. So, for example, the European Union has really good laws on privacy, which kind of align with how I think I want my data to be managed, which might be different from the way you do. And it would align with how I would want my child, if I ever had one, to have their data managed, at least until a point where they were intelligent enough to make a decision of their own. And of course, for my kids, that would be when they're 6. But,
no wonder you haven't had kids yet.
6 weeks. Isn't that important? Isn't it important, for example, that the European laws that protect your privacy matter and can be used to protect the innocent 6-week-old against the big data mining companies that are less scrupulous than the ones that you might be using right now? At least that's how I read Michuki's question. It wasn't about, well, just data sovereignty, as in you can't move this out of a country.
I did say protection of personal information is a good thing. I do think you need to opt in. I make my choice to make my data freely available. And I should be protected from unscrupulous users. But I do think it is a personal choice. It's not my government's choice. They can make enabling regulations, but if I choose to make my data freely available, there is no way the South African government can turn around and say, I'm not making it available to Amazon in the US. They don't have that choice for me. They can make sure that I'm protected and I've opted in to choose to make it available, fine. I've no issue with that. Although I hate big nanny states, but that's a complete other conversation, probably over a beer rather. But if I choose to opt in, my data should be freely available.
Hi, I'm Tony. I just think there's a bit of a contradiction when you talk about big data and commercialization and then making it freely available. If you, I don't know, you use Apple, you use Facebook, Google, they actually own that data, and the T's and C's says, this is our data. So, and then as soon as you start using their platforms, you're automatically giving them unintended information that you are not even aware of. So the opt-in happens when you buy that shiny new phone, or if you win an iPhone 7 256 gig at a beer fest, then that's, you opt in immediately once you have that electronic device in your hand. So the idea of opting in is not always that simple. And also, once a commercial organization uses your data for commercial purposes, they don't want to share it with anybody else, and you don't even own that information. So for me, I think that's a contradiction, and the whole idea of free big data or personal data being freely available, I think is actually very dangerous. A good example is Truecaller. I think that's like an application that's actually a violation on people's rights, because the person who has my number and uses Truecaller has opted in, but I didn't opt into Truecaller. So the rest of the world shouldn't know that when my phone rings, it's me. So that's again, that's freely available information, but then you reach a point where you don't even have control over how your personal data is shared, because if I send a WhatsApp message to somebody who's given Facebook access to their message and that message ends up on a public platform, that person opted in, I didn't opt in. So I think this contradiction, and big data is nice, but it's very dangerous, I think.
I do agree with you there. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it should be used as a force for good, not evil. I use Truecaller. I love it. And my clients are so impressed because I say, "Hi, Joe, how are you doing?" "How the hell did you know it was me? Have you got all my phone numbers loaded of all of our clients?" And there's thousands of them. They've yet to catch up the fact that Truecaller exists. But I think, again, it gets back to we need to start living our lives differently. If you're doing something online that you don't want to get shared, what are you doing? By opting in, by having an Android phone, you're freely giving access to everybody. Why is that a bad thing? Unless they're using it for bad. And I agree, there are certain things that they can use for bad. But generally, they shouldn't be. They'll be using it to deliver the most effective services to you as an individual, the customer of one. As things mature and they start using it more, then we can start punishing the ones that don't use it the right way, and we stop buying their services. We've got the loudest voice in the world. If you don't like it, don't use it.
But I think there's still a lot of unintended consequences to that, because if I never opted into something, if I'm a recovering gambler, for instance, and somebody who's still a gambler has me on his gambling group from 5 years ago, and now I'm getting all these gambling adverts, well, so I just think that even the people who are advertising the services to us do actually not, they have noble intentions, but if I never opted into any advert, I do not want to receive it, because there might be a reason why I don't want to receive those adverts, and I don't want to have to explain to the person who calls me and tries to sell me something I don't need.
Point taken. Another business opportunity. Directed ad blocker. Not just to block all ads, but to block specific ads. Another business opportunity.
All right, thanks very much for the questions. And with big data comes many big questions. I'm still trying to figure out how we're going to get 20 billion IPv4 addresses, but